I'm a PR expert, strategic advisor, and entrepreneur. I'm passionate about helping women to be seen and heard for their expertise, and I'm really passionate about helping to put visibility on the agenda. And I believe that women should never give up.
Hey, I'm Di Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. In business today, brand and visibility is so important, but not to the detriment of authenticity, integrity, and ethics. And we're going to be joined in the virtual studio today by a subject matter expert who has made the power of visibility her shtick. Karen Eck, welcome to the Power of Women.
Thank you for having me. There's a lot of power going on here, isn't there? The Power of Women, I love your title, of course, and the power of visibility. So thank you for having me. I have listened to a number of your episodes. I've got to say, you are such a pro.
Oh,
Congratulations on the
thank you,
podcast. It's
Karen.
sensational. And you are speaking my
Thank you.
language because you're really helping women to, tell their stories. And that's really what I'm about.
Yeah. So there's rather a simpatico in terms of what we're doing. So I'm really privileged to talk to you today. Perhaps if we could start, Karen, what is the importance of putting visibility on the agenda?
You know, it's so important. And I actually, when I say on the agenda, I mean literally on the to-do list or the agenda of a meeting. So I do work with corporates, I work with individuals, I work with, sort of the high potentials and everyday business leaders, if you like, and people who are running organizations. What I say on the agenda, I mean, on the Monday meeting and, it's like point 10. I don't mind if it's last. I really, really urge leaders, people making decisions, to put the word visibility and to actually ask the question, well, what's coming up? What's important for us at the moment? What's happening with our clients? And actually having it as a dialogue around the table. It's really super important. And there are reasons for that. It's because we want everyone at the table to have an opportunity to step up. And when we deal with human nature, we know that people, it can be really awkward. They can just feel that it's just terrible to be able to sort of even put their hand up and say something in a meeting, or to feel like, they're completely out of their comfort zone. So if someone else can take the initiative to sort of say, well, look, Di, tell us about what's happening with this particular project you're working on. You've been working so hard for the last 12 months. There's a big milestone coming up. Tell us about that. Let's talk about it in terms of our strategic direction and how we can all work together. It can be a simple conversation. It can be a more complex conversation. But ultimately, what you're enabling that conversation to do is to create some real actions that help that person to potentially to step up. And it might mean that there are a raft of things that need to be done as a result. For example, maybe there's someone who needs to be trained to be speaking in front of a group of people. If they're not comfortable talking to the media, it's an opportunity to be media trained. We can talk more about this as we progress in the conversation, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really important that we're not just asking people to step up. We've actually got to give them the skills. And it's practice. Visibility is a muscle. It is absolutely learnable. And I, in my career, have dealt with lots of people, some of them very talented and some of them not so talented, but it's actually irrelevant. The point is that the practice, and when I mean not so talented, what I mean is that people are given opportunities and maybe they're not the best in the room, but in fact, they've practiced the skills that enable them to step up. And also from a personality perspective, we've got to learn how to be out of our comfort zone and be okay with that. But we do need people alongside us, and we need people who sort of help to lift the boats, so to speak, in that rising tide. We have to do it together. So visibility on the agenda gives people permission. So it often has to come from a team or a leader for that permission to sort of be not just granted, but sort of exercised, and support needs to go along with that. And women in particular really struggle, I think, with putting themselves out there. That whole idea of self-promotion just feels awkward. They don't want to feel like they're being noting themselves. And so what happens is that they can do nothing. And,
Mm.
it's a bit annoying when the person next to you might get the opportunities, the accolades, and yet you're more experienced than them. So
Mm.
what is it that holds you back? So visibility on the agenda is a physical thing. It is,
Yeah.
to every leader out there, if you run a team, my question is, do you have visibility on the agenda? And this is going to be something that they'll think about for themselves. They'll think about it for their team leaders, and they'll think about it for their entire teams. So, there's a lot of work actually in all of this, in unpacking it. But I
Isn't
guess
there?
that's what I mean by putting visibility on the agenda. Permission granted.
Mm. You said something really interesting then about they think about it in themselves. Do you find that if there is a reluctance to put it on the agenda, actually appealing to the ego of the person who's responsible for getting it there is the starting point?
Yeah, everything happens from the top down, right? They've got to set that
Mm.
culture. So when I talk about a culture of visibility, it's actually around, well, does everyone play a part, and do they understand what that part is? Most people don't. I would argue that they don't really necessarily know what permissions they have. So for example, let's look at it from a really sort of practical perspective. On LinkedIn, how do they reference their company? How do they reference what they do? How do they reference their own expertise? So, if you give people the tools and say, look, this is the language that we're really happy for you to use in expressing what we do and our mission, as a company or as a culture, then immediately what you're doing to that professional is saying, you can use all this material with confidence. They're not
Mm.
second guessing it. And if you have someone at the top who lets their ego get in the way, they're probably the sort of person who might say, well, why would anyone else need to be media trained? I'm the spokesperson.
Mm.
But what they're not
Mm.
thinking about is, well, who else can share that story in the organization? And does it need to just be one person? But what about helping to build some of those skills so that, where's the succession plan? And where are the women in your organization? Are they coming
Mm.
through, and are they being trained? So when the opportunity arises, they have the skills and some confidence, which is really, practice, if you like, in being
Absolutely.
able to step up and have an opinion about something. So,
Mm.
it does need to start from the top. I'm working with an executive at the moment. I've actually just finished my visibility program with her. And so this is an individual, and it was her boss who actually identified that she needed some help. And what he said was, you are brilliant at what you do, but no one knows who you are. You need to be more visible. And so that's how they found me, literally more visibility, Karanek. And I love that. First of all, it was a great referral, but it really does speak to what I'm passionate about. So here is a woman who has spent 25 years becoming excellent at her job. She knocked back the leadership role 3 times and suggested that someone else would be more qualified. And we know that that can be common, that you never think you're right or ready for it because you're not 100% ready.
And because you're not male.
You are the most experienced person. I'm not going to interview those 3 other people that you've suggested and put forward, literally put forward their
Mm.
names. I want you to do that job. And you are absolutely the right person for it. But you need help in becoming more confident, in being more visible. And what
Mm.
that looked like was, we had to break it all down. It was really coming up with a bespoke program for her. And what I do with people is to look at, well, what are the sorts of things that you need help with? Because everyone's different. So this is where not every program fits everyone. And I do
Mm.
these sessions typically over around 6. So it's sort of like visibility coaching in some way, but I'm very strategic
Yes.
about it. And I look at the strategic goals as well. Like, what is it they really need this to do? And in this case,
Mm.
it was working on the confidence piece, but also looking at all the assets that they need to enable them to step up and to tell their story. And I call that being visibility asset ready. That asset ready means when someone gives you an opportunity to step up, you're not scrambling to rewrite that bio you hate, or, find that photo that makes you look slimmer. It's these things that
Mm.
stop you in your tracks. And if you're a busy working person, and there are millions and millions of people that feel that way. You don't have time for that. And it makes you second guess. It makes you say, I can't be bothered. It's too much. I'll say no. So being asset ready is just a little bit of the housekeeping that we get sorted. So that is the imagery that we need to sort of be able to tell your story, just being comfortable with that. So updating your image, you're updating your photos, maybe having an editorial sort of style to the photography as well. Your bio, there might be a number of versions that you need. The executive I worked with needed an Australian version and an international version of her bio because she was talking to an international audience half of the year. And it does need to be different. There are different nuances. We can't assume that everyone understands your LinkedIn profile. And then there's the LinkedIn version of it, which is kind of like, an amalgamation of all of that. And then it is looking at, let's create the visibility plan. The plan is typically 3 months to 12 months ahead. And again, everyone is different. And we look at that and say, well, what are we trying to do with this? And, and in that visibility plan, we're going to plot what I call the publicity moments or the visibility moments that really are it's the energy around which you are sort of focusing your attention. Everyone's busy. So I say pick one thing a quarter that we're going to really make it as our focus. And that focus, it could be, for example, and I've just done this with a gentleman who is very shy and he finds it challenging to be in a public environment. He's an economist, so he loves to be behind the computer in a spreadsheet. So it's very challenging for him to be presenting and to be networking, and he'd rather literally poke himself in the eye with a pen. Like that is just like, that would be way nicer. But what we did with him is to recognize his strengths, and he's a great writer. So what I've encouraged him to do is to actually be that person in the office who's really willing to put 1,000 words down around his subject matter expertise, that is around a project that is important for the business and at a time that can be leveraged by, the organization. So the timing of it becomes important. And then the other thing that's really interesting, Di, is that people often don't communicate with the people who are even right next to them or their departments. So in this case, it's let's talk to the person who has to press go on the post on your company LinkedIn. Let's talk about the timing for her, because do you even communicate with her? The answer is usually no.
Yes, I can imagine.
So if you actually open up the channels of communication, then that planning means it's actually more effective for everyone. And it could be that this person says, if you give this to me in, say, 3 weeks' time, that's better than even 2 weeks because we've got so much content that we're working with. And that means you've got my full attention. But what's happened in that whole equation, if you think about it, is visibility is on the agenda.
And it happens internally as well as externally too.
Right. And so when it goes out, in terms of the information is out, it's being supported by the people internally because it's strategically understood to be important, rather than someone thinking, oh, they're just big noting themselves, writing another story. It's not, because I've already discussed it with visibility being on the agenda, that this is a really good idea. And in fact, we had to sort of push him along a little bit to say, this is a good idea and you're such a good writer and you love to support it with infographics and the things you can create that's fun for you. So you kind of look for the things that give you a little bit of a spark, So when we look at visibility strengths, what gives you that spark? What's easy for you that is maybe not so easy for someone else? So I would absolutely challenge anyone who's listening to say, think about your visibility strengths and lean into those and use it to the best of your ability, because it's probably a little bit of fun for you, whereas it might not be for the person that's next to you.
And you want to point out the differentiation so that your visibility actually stands out in a crowded marketplace. So you want to play to your strengths.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. You've got to be able to sort of work together and know that it's okay, because otherwise, if there's a sense of overwhelm, people don't do anything.
That's right. So, Karen, winding back a moment, and we'll come back and delve further into the aspects of what makes up sort of the visibility pack, if we could. How did you get here, and how did visibility on the agenda become something that you were focusing on? Have you got a background in more traditional PR, or
I
please
do.
share
I
with us?
have, yes, I have an even more specific background as a television publicist. So when I was at uni, I did a PR degree, and the communications degrees in those days are relatively new, to be honest. And I went to University of Canberra, and I distinctly remember the moment when my lecturer had, or my tutorial teacher had sort of said, hey, there's an opportunity for an internship at the ABC on Monday. And I think it was like Thursday. And I was born in Sydney. So, going back and forth, from Sydney and Canberra was not an unusual thing for me at all. And the idea of being in Sydney on Monday it was like, sure, I can do that. And, and this lady said, look, I've got this is an internship. Someone's pulled out. There's an opportunity. It's in program sales at the Australian, the ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation television. And I just put my hand up
You
and I
jumped at
looked
it.
around. Well, I looked around and I couldn't believe that no one else put their hand up. And I just thought, are you crazy? Like, this is a door opener. This is the opportunity that you just do not say no to. And I just thought, I can imagine what program sales was about, but it really wasn't the point. And I remember going home and saying to my mum, I'm off to Sydney on Monday to do this internship. And she thought, what a marvelous idea. And I just did that. And when I got there, I was in this tiny, tiny room. I remember it was like a concert. It was full of concertina files. It was like just really not my idea of fun at all. There's like small 4 walls. And I don't really like contracts. I've actually since done a lot of working with contracts, but really that would not be my idea of a great day's work amongst paperwork like that. And I walked out of this little tiny, tiny room, and this woman stopped me in the hallway, and she said, who are you and what are you doing here? I think because she just knew I was a new person in the hallway. And she said, what on earth are you doing in program sales? You're in the wrong department. Come with me. And of course, this would never happen now. She grabbed me by the hand, literally walked me down the corridor about 150 meters, and opened, the door to this gentleman's office and said, hey, Clay, who is the director of television publicity, this is Karen. She's been put in the wrong department. She's doing an internship. I'll leave you to
What a
it.
champion.
She needs to work with you, in publicity. I'll leave you with it. And he literally just turned around and went, he was American. He went, Canadian, actually. Well, welcome. No extra paperwork.
A career
And
is born.
so I didn't even know what a publicist did. I had no idea. I just thought, well, I have no idea. So I just started working, really. And I guess because I was so junior, it's always great to be in an organization where people are teaching you. So I was with people people are teaching, and you're able to learn. And everyone was twice as old as me. So I did feel like I was the junior burger, and deservedly so. And I was then offered a graduate position when I finished my degree. And then that turned into 5 years of working as a publicist at the ABC. And, it was a career I never really thought I'd ever have. But at the ABC in those days as well, you did everything. So I actually became quite comfortable with organizing events, doing, everything in relation to dealing with media, writing materials, pitching stories, pitching the intangible, turning a no into a yes all the time. That was just, you pitch things and someone says they're not interested, but trying to sort of navigate around all of that, creating schedules, managing talent, managing easy talent, managing really difficult talent, and very young, yeah. And so I learned, and so television publicity, or publicity, is a sort of a specialization of PR, public relations, and television publicity is, again, a sort of another sort of niche area. But I loved it. I just worked on lots of different programs. I got to launch shows, work with personalities, and I was always shocked and always a little bit running on my energy. And it worked for me because I have, according to family and friends, a lot of it. But it worked for me because I just ran my own show, my own day, which this complete privilege.
Yes, an unstructured role is a privilege that not many of us get. When you get to create your own position, there's something really, really rewarding about that.
And you have to work hard. One quick story, because I just love it. I just went, sometimes it's about not even what you know, but what you think you need to do. And because I was so new, no one knew me. My very first publicity gig was promoting a show called The Party Machine, and it was ahead of an election. It was 1989 at the time. It's a long time ago. Goodness me. And on this file, my boss came in and said, look, this guy won't work with anyone because he's black banned the publicity department. He had a beef. And I said, who is this person? And you've got to remember, I was living in Canberra. And, it's 3.5 hours drive from Sydney. And, it's not like I would listen to the morning radio. And I was Andrew, the boy genius, Denton. And, of course, this boss said, look, honestly, he said, anything you do is going to be better than what we're currently getting. Like anything. I thought, wow, talk about lower the expectations. But there was zero expectations. And I just said, who is this guy? And it wasn't just, I thought, okay. And I just did what I felt was completely logical, which is I picked up the folder and I thought, well, I'll go to the comedy department because, I don't know, don't you do that? And I walked up to the comedy department and I walked in and I just said, hi, I'm Karen. I'm here to see Andrew Denton, just to introduce myself. I got a standing ovation from the entire comedy department because I said, what's this about? And they said, we've never met anyone from the publicity department. And it had only ever been phone calls and I'm sure they're completely exaggerating. But
there's
the point
the power
is
of visibility starting very early in your repertoire.
Absolutely. I was seen. I walked in, I was seen, I introduced myself, and then I went up to their whiteboard. And again, something that just felt completely natural for me to do. I wasn't being a sticky beak. I was just looking at it going, tell me about this is what you're shooting over the next sort of month. That looks like an interesting shoot with the Prime Minister or something, like logical opportunities. And I think, okay, well, I wonder what I can do with those ideas. So I would walk away with ideas percolating. But anyway, he said wasn't going to do any publicity interviews. And I said, okay. And I just pointed to the gentleman who looked like he was a boss and said, well, who's that gentleman? And they said, oh, he's the executive producer. And I said, can he speak on behalf of the show? Yeah, great. I'll use him. And then 10 minutes later, the producer calls me back and says, he'll do whatever interviews you need. And, I just thought, wow, I was in front. I was simply there. I wasn't being pushy. I had no idea what I was doing, but I did do what I felt was logical and commonsensical, and I was simply communicating.
Do you think that's played into your power of visibility strategy today?
It's definitely, yeah. So the whole lens of my paravisibility work is really coming from those early days of being a trained publicist. So if I was when I work with someone, the first thing we do is a brand stock take, because what we look at is, okay, well, what are we dealing with at the moment? And if I was your publicist and I had the job of putting you forward into the spotlight, and there are varying degrees of all of that, can I do it? And sometimes I really don't have the materials. It's not good enough. And I will be that person to say that imagery isn't going to work. It doesn't serve you well. We can do better. I think let's get that sorted. So then it becomes very practical. Let's organize it. What's comfortable? Let's work through it. So in some cases, it's just helping people to be, you're really creating the solutions for them, and taking the angst out and just creating the opportunity for it to be better and to fix it.
Yeah.
So, those publicity skills have been absolutely fantastic. And some of the work that I do does require some pitching. So in other words, I might say, there's probably some trade publicity that you can be generating. Let's talk about who might be doing that already in your organization. I can see the opportunities. If no one's doing it in the organization, I can take that on because I know how to do that. Or I can work with the publicity or marketing teams to kind of leverage their talent actually and see the opportunities that might be right in front of them. They're all busy, and sometimes they are the last to know what might be going on in your organization or your team or your business.
So was Andrew Denton the first of many big names that you've worked with, given television publicity's become one of your specialized areas?
Yes, Andrew is great. He's such a talent, and he's absolutely brilliant. And so within the
Great
Australian
mind.
market, I really loved working with, I worked with all sorts of different people who are at the, forefront of TV. And then Libby Gore, who's a Melbourne identity, she's wonderful. I
Yes.
worked with Libby's publicity when we were at the ABC as well. And we always used to laugh about the power of a photo, because I could sell
Yeah.
in a story for a cover of a magazine based on one photo, and it needed to be really good. So Libby and I had this brilliant kind of ability to brainstorm and work together to come up with creative solutions, so that that photo encapsulated an idea or a campaign or a movement. And in this case, obviously, we were
And
wanting
she would
people to
understand
turn
all of
on.
that. Mm,
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a
mm.
photo shoot. I've got some photos that, I'll send you, directly, Di. But, I've got my
Lovely.
personal ice skates with like bruises on them that she's got around her shoulders for the Live and Sweaty, show. And, we think about, okay, like, what's going to make this a photo that an editor cannot say no to? And I have in my career had editors say, that is the most incredible image. Uh, we'll work out the story later. We want to use it. So the more exclusivity you can put around an image or an idea, like a story pitch, the stronger that is. And that is something also from a visibility perspective to understand. Less is sometimes more. And I don't advocate necessarily for just being everywhere and being everything to everyone. That doesn't necessarily serve the strategic goal. And if you really pare it back, which is why I say focus on one thing a quarter from a visibility perspective, if it's a cracker and you're putting your attention into it, if that one thing that you want to be doing, you're going to get better results from that focus. But to answer your question about other people, I actually really enjoyed, I started my whole career really working on three different genres to begin with. Besides, comedy, it was sport, which is an interesting conversation around women in sport, children's, and gardening. And,
That's diverse.
whenever you were, but the youngest, most inexperienced person got those three areas because they were deemed not
Ah,
as prime time, not as
yeah, got
important.
it.
And, when we look at women's sport, look where we've come. It has been so exciting. And when I was promoting sport, the only women's programs were netball on a Saturday at 2 o'clock. There really wasn't very much at all. And of course, women have always excelled, in the pool and in certain areas of athletics, but in other areas of sport, we've just come so far. And I'm genuinely so proud of what Australia has done in helping to elevate women's sport in this country. It
Well,
is
interestingly
outstanding.
enough, it was a light bulb moment when the World Cup was on, and the Matildas were everywhere and all over the TV. That became the light bulb moment for me to launch what had been an idea percolating for over a decade, being the power of women, and not
Mm.
quite knowing how I was going to bring that to market. And there was a byline on a breakfast TV show one morning talking about the Matildas with the byline, The Power of Women. And I said to my husband, who's also in media, I said, that's it, time to
Mm.
launch.
Mm.
So women in
It's a
sport's
great
kind of pretty
story.
relevant for me. Mm.
It is. And I think that you've got, that is a really good example of, all elements coming together. I mean, sponsorship is critical, partnerships are critical, the collaborations are key. And it's taken also time, so it's, and sometimes things do just take time, which is kind of why I say never give up. You never, ever give up on your vision and your dream, because time is funny. It can sometimes pass quickly, and you think, goodness, that's been 5 years. I could have done a master's in that time since the last time I thought of an idea. In your case, two masters and a PhD.
Well, a bit
It's
like that. Yeah.
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 So it's we have a lot that we can be positive about. And I think women's sport is incredibly exciting. And it's an Australian, sport is just so much a part of our DNA, our cultural DNA. So it is vital that we keep those narratives going and that we elevate women and we give them opportunities to be seen and heard as well. But when I was at the ABC, one thing I actually loved, and it kind of then fed into my I guess, other things I did in my career, is I worked a lot on documentaries, and science and features was an area that I worked on. Drama, of course, but I love documentaries, and that's real story, real people telling real stories, right? And they're exciting, and I always felt incredibly privileged to meet someone who is doing something extraordinary. And in some cases, it had been their life's work. Maybe they had discovered something, they had gone completely out on a limb, and they're not famous. In some cases they are famous, in some cases they are not. But ordinary people doing extraordinary things is still a passion area for me, because I just get goosebumps when I think of what people are capable of doing and achieving.
That's brilliant. Well, Karen, we'll take a quick break, and coming up, I'd like to work through, if we could, for somebody listening, how they might go about the strategic build of their own visibility platform. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump on to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. Hey, I'm Di Gillett, and this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience, and achievement of women from all walks of life. In each episode, I pose questions to my guests to peel away the layers to reveal the knowledge and the experience that shapes their narrative. So if you're feeling unseen, unheard, or simply looking for inspiration, then the Power of Women podcast is a great place to join the conversation. So, Karen, we've been talking about the power of visibility. If somebody was going to build out their strategic plan around elevating their visibility, I would love to explore with you how an individual goes through the stepping stones to build a strategic plan around elevating their visibility. I'm really having trouble with that word visibility today.
Whenever I say the word visibility to my mum, who's 89, she thinks I'm saying disability. And
oh, no.
She needs hearing aids, so she really doesn't know what I do. So
well, the podcast
okay,
listener might think I am too by the time we play that back. So what are the steps without going into, your whole plan, but just the thumbnail of what somebody would be focusing on?
I think the first thing is to acknowledge that you are keen to be more visible. Keen is probably actually not the right word, because you might not be keen at all, but you realise
it might be a need.
That it's important.
Yes.
That you need to be more visible. Thank you. That's a way better way of expressing it. So you need to be more visible, and that can be identified by someone in your organisation, or it could be something you finally come to realise for yourself. So for women who feel overlooked for promotion, that the jobs aren't there for them, that they're sort of feeling a lack of confidence, that maybe they've been out of the workforce and they've come back in and they just don't think that they have the same runs on the board anymore, even though they're still skilled and experienced. So, and often, mid-career women definitely find visibility more challenging than women who are coming out of the starting gates, for example, at, say, university. They're fine. They're just off and running. But around about 15, 20 years in, something I've noticed really happens, which is
because they feel their careers plateau.
And it probably is plateauing, and other people are being promoted ahead of them. Maybe they're working part-time, maybe they're burnt out, maybe they're sick of it all. Their personality might mean that they just don't like being or seeming to be pushy, but they're feeling overlooked and they're feeling invisible.
And they may well be feeling that in their personal life too, Karen, because this is going to coincide at a certain age, isn't it?
Exactly. So recognizing that you feel invisible in your career is probably the first step. The second is to genuinely understand what a greater visibility will do with you, do for you professionally. So I ask, and I don't mind sharing it with you, but in my program, I ask two really important questions, and and it's always the same because this is where the gold is. And the first one is to think about what a greater profile would do for you professionally. So I get people to think about it, write it down. It's different for different people, and different stages of their career. And some of those, even though I'm asking about it on a professional level, obviously, for some people, it can be a bit more personal. But I'm really asking, what do you want this to do? What is greater visibility going to do for you? And then I ask, what are the barriers that hold you back? And after working with hundreds and hundreds of people and asking these questions, the responses often fall into four categories. So there is sort of a lack of confidence. So they're the sorts of things that people might say, I don't feel comfortable, I don't have the language, etc., etc. So there may be a fear of failure or judgment. The second is sort of a lack of know-how. So that's like not really having the strategies and ideas. That's the easy bit to fix. And the third is personality. So if they're an introvert, they're reserved, they're going to blame their personality to say, oh, I couldn't think of anything worse. I'm nowhere. I'm not going to go on a panel. I'm not going to be visible because I'm too shy, or it's not in my makeup.
And the only thing they've ever known is Toastmasters, and that didn't appeal.
And they may not even have turned up to that. And the fourth is a sense of overwhelm. And I think that's the hardest to deal with because that can be a little bit more complex. But effectively, the to-do list is too long, it's too overwhelming, so you do nothing at all. And so you never move that dial on your visibility because it just becomes, it doesn't seem like it's achievable. So what I do to start with is to really break that down by looking at those two questions. And then from that, it's about creating a bespoke program. So I work with individuals because I think sometimes people need it's like a discrete service, but it's discrete because they don't really want this to be known that they're working on all of this.
Working on themselves, yeah. Isn't that
themselves.
An interesting point? Because there's almost a shame attached to that, but it shouldn't be. That should be applauded, not kept in the dark.
That's true. But if the boss recommends that they need to be more visible, immediately what's happened, because visibility is on the agenda, is they've been given permission to feel awkward and to work through it. If they have to do this themselves, it's a lot harder. And look, this does come under professional development, by the way. So an organization, it fits under coaching, if you like. I mean, coaching is something that everyone understands.
Yeah, so they can justify leaving at 3:00 because they're off to spend time on this.
They're going coaching. You can call it coaching. It's visibility coaching. And look, I'm not a classic coach, but effectively, it's visibility coaching. And we create a program that makes sense for them, for the right reasons at the right time. Then what we do as individuals is to create that plan, 3 to 12 months, and we pick those moments and the things that we want to do. So an executive that I just worked with was doing a big presentation on stage, but no one had ever taken her through auto cue. And it was going to be delivered.
And they're not easy to use. Mm.
And you know what? That's a bit unfair, actually. So what I did is I got an auto cue expert in. We worked in a little studio and we let them practice for 2.5 hours on just learning as if they were being a TV presenter, because it's not their natural space, and just giving them a little bit more confidence and feeling like, okay, if something happens, I'm not going to worry about that anymore. I'm going to worry about something else. And we also, I can bring in voice coaches. I can bring in stylists. I bring in my amazing contacts of people who are brilliant at what they do to make someone else feel like they've got the help that they need. So that's why it's so incredibly important that it's bespoke in that sense. And that's typically, I would recommend 6 sessions for visibility is enough. And then what I normally do is say you need what's called like a visibility bucket, meaning we draw on, some funds, which is already predetermined to say, right, this is what we can use to do the work that we need to do. And the reason why that's also important is that it's not judged by other people. It's important that people don't feel awkward about having a stylist. Because quite frankly, maybe that's the thing that they really need to get sorted.
Well, in my experience, I think it's what a lot of people need. They do not acknowledge the importance of it.
And if you think it doesn't matter, you're wrong. It does
Yeah.
matter. The other thing is, it's about saving time. So if you know if you think about, okay, this important presentation, which is being filmed and photographed and shared on all of our social assets or on our website, you want to feel comfortable. So if you're looking your best and feeling your best, then that's
You
one
will
thing. But
present
also
well.
if you know it looks good because you've taken the effort to actually think about or have an expert actually advise you, then it's saving you a lot of time because you just grab the clothes and out the door. You don't have to think about it anymore. So this is sort of plays into this asset ready sort of
And
mindset, which
we
I think
know
is really important.
females, unfortunately, are still judged more around their appearance than males are. So I have no doubt the importance that you place on that when you're coaching women in terms of power of their visibility.
Women need to they need to dress to suit their own style and their shape. And we're no longer 20. We change, and so sometimes we hang on to things because we think, oh, I love it, but really maybe your body shape has changed a lot, or maybe through menopause you've just you're a different shape now. And so you get something that you love, that makes you feel comfortable, for all the right reasons. And of course, if we're talking menopause, it means you got to have layers. So you
Yes,
don't
well,
want
I'm
something
renowned for
where
pushing the envelope on all of that, Karen. I must say I'm probably older than I might look, but I'm struggling with acknowledging that.
So menopausal vest, a friend of mine lives in the UK and laughs at the menopausal vest, and that's what they call it over there. And I went, really? But it is quite genius because, we want to have our arms free, but a little vest is a great idea.
Yeah.
So going back to the program, I work with the individuals. So another way of looking at this would be, if it's not business owners or subject matter experts, it's also high potentials. So someone that might not necessarily be C-suite, but they're sort of the one level under where they actually do need to step up.
So it's a
And they don't
it's a
want to
leadership
ask.
development tool.
Absolutely. It's professional
Yeah.
development, 100%.
Mm.
And so I do work with organizations as well. So there's a program that I run for teams. I worked with a wonderful organization called NATA. They're a National Association of Testing Authorities, a bunch of data scientists. They just, generally speaking, all of these people just hate everything.
Sounds like a room full of actuaries.
Right. But you know what? You move the dial more with people who find this incredibly awkward. And what was fantastic is it was all around developing a culture of visibility. And I'll tell you why this was important. They were celebrating a milestone year, 75 years, but no one with market research had ever heard of them. And the reason is that they're the people who test the testers. So they are the people who make sure your seatbelts work and your water is safe to drink and the roads are of the right quality to be
They're an
driving
important
on.
group.
They're really important. And the first gentleman that I spoke to, when I asked him how he introduces what he does, like, this is part of the visibility equation, as well as how do you share your expertise and how do you
Yeah.
explain what you do in a way that's kind of interesting. And, he said, well, I said, well, what do you say if someone asks you around the barbecue? And he said, oh, you wouldn't understand. So what I did is I really worked with the marketing department and got their key messaging. Okay, so this is important. The marketing department had spent a year developing important messaging.
And that would have been one of the most important messages, quite
Right?
literally.
And it hadn't really trickled down to how does someone use it in an everyday context? How do they use it when they're talking to a client? It's all very well if you're the sales manager and you're used to being out there and right there in front of people. But there are plenty of people who are not. But what that gentleman missed was an opportunity to share the brand and the brand vision and raise awareness for the organization. It was a missed opportunity. So after working with, the marketing department, we bring the messaging in. Because I'm a publicist and I've worked a lot in that area and with marketing experts, I know how I can use that information and help them to use it. So one of the first things that we did was to be able to make sure that everyone's using the same language on their LinkedIn, how they express themselves, and giving them permission and enabling them to practice it. And might sound simple, but
But it's
it's
not,
really, really
because
necessary.
I think of brands that I see in individuals on LinkedIn, and they've got, different background images rather than the brand image of the organization. All of those things matter, but so many individuals and businesses miss that
Absolutely.
and weaken the message out to market.
So in this case, this organisation had 185 staff, and what they got me to do was to do a general webinar, which they would all see, which is almost like an onboarding tool as well, to say here are the things that you can use, how to be more visible in your role, in your and you know, in your team, how to lift others, and externally. And it was permission granted. It was, you know, it was giving them sort of some parameters of the do's and the don'ts. And people need that, particularly if they are, you know, introverted, and they, you know, if they love an Excel spreadsheet, they love this, they love the detail, and they want to know what can I do, when and where and how, and then they're really happy to do it because they know they've got the confidence that can go along with that now. They go, okay, I'm not going to get in trouble for saying such and such. I've actually got this permission. And once we then, we set up a program for 33, we called them advocates. So it was a very clever way to do it, where we had advocates, and I worked with them on some workshops on Zoom, because everyone's all over Australia. And then I worked with around about 13 specific people who had a real responsibility to step up.
And use them to amplify it.
Well, they had more of a responsibility because they had a team. But what I was teaching them was, well, how do you then empower your team to be more visible? What does that look like? How do you, how do you enable, how do you put visibility on the agenda? So I have this conversation going back to the beginning about, I want that word visibility as a line item in your weekly meeting, because then you're giving people permission to have a moment where their expertise is seen, heard, validated. It makes them feel good. Other people help them to be seen. It makes them feel good, and it's working towards the strategic goals of the company. And, and that's really what that culture of visibility is all about. It's working from top down and bottom up. So it's understood, permission granted.
Yeah. And is networking part of this whole visibility strategy?
It's a great question, because I think networking is really critical. And one of the programs I run, or a workshop I run rather, is called Networking Like a Pro. And I did this with another economics firm, and they had a milestone to celebrate. And all of them absolutely could not think of anything worse than going and networking with clients. And this is their party.
It's difficult for a lot of people.
So we, in this workshop, what we did is we actually broke it down to understand the science of networking. And when you think about why and how networking can be beneficial, and so, for example, you can actually be a bridge. And so a bridge in networking is someone who might connect one person to another. So if you think about the value of a bridge, someone who acts as a bridge, suddenly you've got like a purpose. You can introduce Sally to Mark because they've got common interests in this area of business. You've actually connected people.
So there is a science to networking.
There is, and it's something you can learn. And one gentleman that I've worked with, he said, when I go into a room, I just look for the most awkward person that feels just like me. And I go and talk to them, because I know that they'll be grateful.
Well,
to talk
walking
to
into a big room on your own and breaking open a conversation with perfect strangers can be really disarming. Yeah.
And I actually do a bit of role playing as well. So we talk about the polite exit. And so, that was one of the things that, people would ask me about. I don't know how to leave the conversation in a networking environment, to the point where this gentleman stayed talking to the same person for 3 hours.
Yes, and didn't get any benefit.
Because he felt so awkward about leaving that conversation. He was two awkward people feeling awkward about it. And so what I would do is just really help with some language around, well, these are the sorts of things you can say, and you can be a bridge by bringing someone else into the conversation, helping to move it on, actually being helpful.
And then move out.
And then, yes. And so it's skills, and it's actually practice. So people might think, oh, I'm not a natural, but I believe everyone can network.
Because it is a learnt skill. Yeah.
100%, and honestly, I mean, my husband's more of an introvert. He would much rather have, one good conversation with a person, whereas I love working the room, but I love working the room with purpose. And it's one of the reasons why I co-founded an initiative called Collaborate Women, because in COVID, it was very challenging in COVID for people to, well, after COVID, to get back to networking.
Yeah,
I think
people
a lot of,
lost the knack of it.
and the interest, and also the fear of walking into a room full of a lot of people. So off the back of COVID, I'd actually was this a new friend, really. I was doing a photo shoot, as one does, to update my visibility assets. And I met this person who had been locked out of Singapore and couldn't get back in, so had to then start anew in Australia. And her network here was 6 years old. And she said, I just don't know anyone apart from some people I knew 6 years ago. And I said, look, I'd be happy to introduce you to a couple of people. She said, well, you can meet my friends that I've known for a while. And that started within 3 weeks. Actually, we'd come up with a concept. 20 minutes on the phone is the truth. Collaborate Women with an 8. And I had a very strong sense that people would not want to be going into a room full of 100 people or 50 people. In fact, they were just not there yet. They were terrified of COVID. They felt uncomfortable. But would they come to a table of 8? And my personal view was yes. And I thought, it also suits the introvert, because an introvert would prefer to go to a table of 8 than just go to a networking event, because it's terrible walking into a room when you don't know anyone. So that's how Collaborate Women was born. And we're entering our 4th year now. We predominantly operate them in Sydney. We have done one in Melbourne. But what we do is that people register, collaboratewomen.com, and then we do check people out, so we make sure people are coming with the right intention. And if you're when you are invited, you're able to invite a professional +1. The reason why that's important is that we're really teaching people how to network their own networks, extend their own networks. And often people will just think, oh, I'll invite my sister or my bestie. What I would say is think a little bit more broadly. Is there a client you'd like to thank? Is there a business relationship you'd like to build? It's hard to invite people to things these days. So that gives them a real purpose in bringing someone. And the other thing is they then walk in with a +1. It makes them feel more comfortable. And then they sit at the same table. Sometimes they don't. They request not to, because they might know each other very well. I did have a woman say, I want to sit right next to my +1, because we've been working and operating on Zoom for 2 years and I've never met her.
I've never met them. Yeah, there's a lot of that, isn't there?
So we're really helping people to kind of network more effectively. And when you come to just a table of 8, it's achievable. And so our last event was at the Beautiful Crown at Barangaroo, and we had 17 tables of 8. It was a huge event, but it still felt intimate. You're going to one table, and we have a lead who actually helps to facilitate conversation. And we ask people to be leads based on their sort of interest in doing that. There are lots of really great facilitators in our network. We have 1,000 people on our database already. And this is sort of their jam. They love it. It gives them something to do that they love doing, and it's easy for them. But we facilitate questions. So there's not a lot of small talk. And we dive pretty deeply into questions that matter for women in business. So I kind of say, look, unapologetically, we're not a mother's group. I've got 2 kids, but this is not where we need to talk about
Yeah, it's not the forum.
And it's not
That's
a
great.
recruitment service. So if you don't have a job, it's probably not the place for you. It's not to say you can't get inspiration. And it's not, don't come expecting to do business. Come to authentically connect with someone. So you're just coming to have a great conversation over beautiful food. We try and focus on female-led venues, by the way, Di. It's hard to find them wherever we can.
Yeah. I can think of a few for you in Melbourne, and
Wonderful.
I'm sure if there's
down.
anyone listening, they could shoot them through to you on your website or on LinkedIn too as a direct message.
So that networking piece, there are people who come and it is the only thing that's in their diary in terms of a sort of a scheduled thing that they do every month. It's the only networking that they do. And we're talking about barristers and, lawyers and finance people and creatives. We've got artists, we've got, engineers, we've got entrepreneurs and people launching products, and it's a huge mix and variety. So diversity is key. We really focus on diversity at the table. But that networking piece is definitely something that people can learn to do better. and it's looking for opportunities to kind of engage with people. And I would say too, the one top tip I give about networking is to just sort of focus on having one conversation at a time. That's it.
Got it. Well, we're going to have to focus on having another conversation at another time, Karen, because we could talk about this forever, because the power of visibility's got so much to it, and it is so critical, and such a privilege for a subject matter expert such as yourself to take us through how one approaches elevating or even acknowledging that they need to elevate their visibility. And I think that's the starting point, isn't it? Is the acknowledgement of recognizing it's a thing.
And if someone's doubting whether or not they should be even becoming sort of, vocal about their expertise and sharing their expertise, I would love to leave one thought with you. That the Women in Media Network, it's actually a non-for-profit in Australia, represents about 6,000 women who work across the media landscape. So it used to be, the classic journalists, so you're talking editors and writers, but now, of course, with podcasts, like podcast hosts as yourself, people who work in production, people who work as editors, in this whole new world of media that we are in, and PR and communications and so forth. It's a much bigger pool. The Women in Media Gender Scorecard was some research that was that had startling results that really makes you sit back and think, wait a minute, it revealed that in terms of media representation of experts in Australia, they actually looked at broadcast and newspapers and all of that across a 2-week period. And only 30% of women were represented as experts. So in other words, journalists themselves are going to 70% of men, to be quoted on really important issues. And this is despite some industries having more women. So what does that tell you about the need for women to be more quotable, the need for more women to be trained? So I would urge any managers out there, think about the women that are coming through as your subject matter experts, and do they have the support, and are they being trained appropriately to embrace the power of visibility? You need to give them permission and enable them to be skilled up in that area so they can sort of more confidently step up to share their expertise, because by sharing stories, we make powerful changes. That's how change is
absolutely
made.
So how does somebody find you, Karen, if an individual or an organisation is looking to engage your services and perhaps undertake one of these programs?
Thank you, Di. There's probably two areas I'd recommend. LinkedIn. I think everyone should be on LinkedIn. If you're not, it's a powerful place to be. And Karen Eck is easy to find on LinkedIn. You can also go to thepowerofvisibility.com.au. And I'd say those two things. I do have a visibility check up there. It's a bit of a visibility health check that I would recommend if anyone just wants to do that. And there's an opportunity to win a spot at an upcoming workshop, or an opportunity to have a free consultation with me. So I'm happy to open that up to all of your listeners and hope and viewers, and hope that we get to move that dial on visibility.
Brilliant. And I would really encourage listeners today to share this episode, because this whole visibility piece is something you might not have given a lot of thought to. But in hearing what Karen has said to us today, I think we can leave without a shadow of a doubt just how important it is. So thank you, Karen. Thank you to the audience for listening. You can also follow me on the socials and my website, powerofwomen.com.au. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.